Ever since Thanos dusted half of all existence and pieced out through a space portal, fans have been looking for any clue as to how Earth's mightiest heroes, well, those that are still left, will be able to fix the snap and bring back the dusted. There are plenty of clues that point to time travel being more than a small part of Avengers Endgame, but what'll that mean for the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Janet Van Dyne's last words to Scott Lang before she shrunk into the quantum tunnel packed into the back of Lewis's van was, "Try to avoid time vortexes. If you get caught in one, we might not be able to save you." It comes right after a warning about the tardigrades. You remember the tardigrades, Neil deGrasse Tyson's favorite creatures from the Cosmos series that are now in all science fiction? So it could easily be seen as a throwaway line. However, with set photos showing Ant-Man at the Battle of New York, say what? And new trailers featuring our favorite heroes doing the right stuff walk in quantum suits, it seems clearer than ever that whatever the Avengers have to do to undo Thanos' snap will involve time travel. It doesn't take a Doctor Who fan or a Marty McFly to tell you that. Once you start messing with time, things can get pretty messy. One change can end up changing the world drastically in the future. Since all the clues seem to point to today's Avengers going back to the Battle of New York, such a simpler time, when Thanos was just a tease in a deeper state of purple. Let's imagine that they're there to steal the Mind Stone. Makes sense, right? The Mind Stone in Loki's scepter that allowed him to control Hawkeye and Dr. Selvig was the last stone Thanos needed to complete his death-dealing gauntlet and the key to giving the ever-noble Vision life. If you take it out all the way back in the first Avengers movie, the snap never happens and everything is back to normal, right? Wrong. That disgruntled S.H.I.E.L.D. agent never steals the stone and hands it off to Baron Strucker. Hey, someone in the MCU got to keep his Baron title. Very nice. Which means the good Baron never uses the Mind Stone to experiment on the Maximoff twins. The Avengers never get the scepter back, which means that the Science Bros never get around to experimenting with it. They never make Ultron, who never tries to use Sokovia as a pawn to destroy the world. One Helmut Zemo, who didn't keep his Baron title, unfortunately, doesn't have a family ripped away from him in their attack and never takes his revenge on the Avengers. Bucky Barnes remains in hiding. T'Chaka remains alive, and then has to face his nephew Eric Killmonger instead of T'Challa. And that's just the direct effects of the Mind Stone being taken out of play that early in what Feige now refers to as the Infinity Saga of the MCU. That terminology, however, is no mistake. Feige and just about everyone else involved with the juggernaut that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe has indicated that the world of Marvel on the big screen is going to look very different after Endgame than it has leading up to it. In an upcoming issue of Empire magazine, Feige said, "We wanted to bring to a conclusion a series of movies in a way that had never been done before. Harry Potter had an ending because there were only so many books, Lord of the Rings too. But we thought 22 movies in, wouldn't it be fun to bring some finality to the storyline? And this is where the MCU faces a hurdle not as common in the comics. In the comics, Peter Parker has managed to be between his teens and early 30s for 57 years now. On the page, Peter can always be as young as he needs to be, but as adorable as Tom Holland is, he can't stay young forever. There's only so far Marvel's marvelous de-aging can take things. Then there's the issue of multi-picture contracts. As hard as it is to imagine, actors might not want to be superheroes forever. With Endgame, most of our favorite Avengers reached the end of their multi-picture deals, so eventually things would have to change. But we don't want it to change. Which brings us back around to time travel and the shockwave it can send through the MCU. And in that same issue of Empire, Christopher Marcus, one of the screenwriters for Endgame, and someone who has been with the MCU since Captain America the First Avenger, mentioned the difficulty of messing with the Marvel timeline. The MCU continues to exist. What happens to be in it is a fluid and evolving thing where, because it's all connected, you can't reboot one. All of the parts have to work together. Things continue, but like life, losses are real, and change is real. Yeah, which is true. The whole point of a shared cinematic universe is to have all the characters and stories be intertwined in some way. On the farther end of the MCU, mostly in the television shows, there could be a name drop of Wakanda or a hero coming to terms with their role through a kid's fascination with Captain America. But with all of this interconnectivity, there are still 22 movies, several TV shows, tie-in comics, and short films made by individual artists. As consistent and diligent as Feige and his company have been, it's not been all seamless. There's timeline confusion, like in the infamous 8 years later in Spider-Man Homecoming, that Feige has admitted was a mistake, as well as the notorious rough relationship with Marvel Television and the cinematic division. The Avengers still think of Coulson as dead, even though his antics have made the news in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And no one in the movies has mentioned the Inhumans, despite them being a very public element of the last few seasons of the flagship MCU TV show. Though after the Inhumans limited series, maybe it's for the best, huh? Yeah, let's bury that one. While these things might seem like mistakes, it's perhaps the most comic book accurate thing that could possibly happen. At one point in time, there were 4 different Spider-Man titles: Web of Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, and Plain Old Spider-Man, all running at the same time. Spider-Man sure is a popular character. Good job, Pete. While Christopher Marcus might be skeptical about the MCU's ability to reboot, there's a mechanism that comics have been using to clean up their timelines other than a reboot or a relaunch. Both Marvel Comics and DC make use of multiverses, which are several parallel realities that contain similar but slightly different timelines. It might be an Earth that looks like a regular Marvel Earth, but instead of Peter Parker being Spider-Man, Miles Morales might be Spider-Man. Or when Gwen Stacy wasn't able to save Peter Parker and becomes Ghost Spider or Spider-Gwen. In fact, the MCU is just one of the many Marvel realities, including Earth 92131, which is the 90s X-Men cartoons, as well as Spider-Man. Crazy, right? So what happens when that mess gets a little too big? Well, you have a massive crossover event that resets things. Recently, Marvel brought its Ultimates universe to an end during the Secret Wars. But what does this have to do with time travel? Well, time travel is a tricky thing. If you accept that there are different parallel realities, the theory is that these come about by small changes. Gwen Stacy gets bit instead of Peter Parker. Clark Kent lands somewhere other than Kansas. Uatu the Watcher had his own Marvel series asking what if one thing had changed. Time travel can create and correct all of these changes. While it doesn't seem likely that Endgame is going to wipe out 2/3 of the Phase 2 and 3 movies by removing the Mind Stone, it does seem likely that they'll go about changing something key about the universe. Some of these changes are inevitable. Some heroes' actors will no longer be in the MCU, and some of their story arcs are coming to a close. There's even been rumors and partial announcements of a new set of young Avengers taking over. Exciting! In fact, we've already met some key members. The adorable Cassie Lang, Ant-Man Scott Lang's daughter, already volunteered to be her dad's sidekick. That was cute, right? Well, it's also not that far off. As in the comics, Cassie Lang grows up in more ways than one to become the hero's stature. Carol Danvers' best friend's daughter, nicknamed Lieutenant Trouble, grows up to be the hero Photon. In the latest Endgame trailer, we see a happier time as Clint Barton teaching a young woman archery, hinting at someone like Kate Bishop, who took up the mantle of Hawkeye in the comics. One of the best MCU villains so far has been the charismatic Eric Killmonger from last year's Black Panther. In that movie, Killmonger decided it was better to die than to live in chains. It was a fitting end for a character so defined by his mission, but that was before the box office success that surprised even Marvel. Changes in the timeline might open the door for Killmonger to escape death, either by having something happen that prevents him from dying, or the changes allowing him to slip back from the spirit realm as a former Black Panther back to our own realm. There are other villains and storylines left on the table that some changes could bring forward. Samuel Stearns was last seen laughing maniacally while gamma juice poured into a head wound, surely on the way to becoming the Hulk villain, the leader. In a tie-in comic, he was shot in the leg by Black Widow and taken into custody. With no solo Hulk movie on the horizon thanks to a complicated rights deal with Universal, that Hulk story has been left untold. Also, OG Hulk hater General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross has gone from #1 Hulkbuster to more of a force supervisor for the Avengers. A timeline adjustment might return Thunderbolt Ross to his Hulk-hating roots and even open the door for the Red Hulk to make his way into the MCU. It's more than just old characters lying around that make time travel and its lasting changes affect the MCU going forward. If the first 11 years and 22 movies of the MCU are the Infinity Saga, there has to be a new defining feature for the next 10 years and 20 movies that Marvel is already planning. There are already characters walking around the MCU that don't truck with defying the basic rules of the universe. One of these being that time goes in one direction and one speed only. Even when Doctor Strange used the Time Stone's ability to warp time to save the Hong Kong Sanctum, it was too much for the sorcerer Mordo, who immediately set removing sorcerers as a result. It's possible that Mordo isn't the only one who can be sensitive to the changes when someone goes about messing with time, or thinking that there are consequences that people might not have considered. In the comics, there's one character in particular who has a long history of messing with the Avengers, as well as the Fantastic Four using time travel as his primary gimmick, and that, of course, is Kang the Conqueror. In the comics, Kang the Conqueror is a man from the future who's traveled to the past to create power. The future to gain it, and the past again to save the future where he rules. In the comics, he's the result of a little bit of hero worship, but he's also responsible for a key member of the Young Avengers, Iron Lad. In fact, Iron Lad is Kang the Conqueror. It turns out that Kang was showing off to his younger self, but a little too early. So his younger self joined the fight against his older self, which, yeah, time travel is just super complicated. But Kang could be the ultimate result of the time travel shenanigans of the Infinity Saga, meaning that the Infinity Saga would directly result in the next saga for the MCU, which might include Kang as well as other galactic-sized threats. And that's how time travel in Endgame will affect the MCU timeline moving forward. Let us know in the comments what you think will happen and what it'll mean for Earth's mightiest heroes in Phase 4 of the MCU. While you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to CBR for some more great MCU videos. Thanks for watching.